Welcome everybody to Thinking Thursday. I think we've got a particularly widely anticipated discussion this week. Regular guests David Mitchell and Peter Harnden, and there's only really one place to start. And David, you ran a column. You were invited to do a Monday column in the Racing Post this last week. I thought it was a very good column. I thought it was there was a lot of important things to say, and I think it seems to have been very well received by the Greyhound community. What's kind of the background to it all?
Yeah, I think it has been well received. The majority of people that have contacted us have said they found it interesting. If anything, it gave them a kind of different perspective to look at the way the board is made up, and it was also, relevant at the time, especially with the ESL and the discussions around the fans and how within 48 hours that was thrown out. But no, it sounds like it's been well received, and most of the feedback has been positive.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, a couple of things occurred to me reading it. I'm quite conscious because I like always to just challenge things, and one of the things that I wanted to challenge, not particularly in your article, but the follow up to it, there were a lot of people, anti Greyhound Board people, who have their own agendas, and they were looking just to get stuck into the Greyhound Board for their own personal reasons and various things. I've gone on record previously of saying I think the Greyhound Board does a good job overall, but it is limited. And I think what you really brought out was the potential for things to go septic, the potential for the nature of the board to be exploited if that took place. I think we've all in the past said that Mark Bird and the chairman, Jeremy Cooper, they are the guys that are charged with keeping a balance as best they can. And so far, they certainly seem to be doing that job. Once we get into the commercial side of things and the various issues with track prize money, owners disappearing from the sport, etc., etc., I my personal view is that they only have a certain amount of clout in that. At the end of the day, they can't tell trainers, they can't tell the tracks to open up to let the owners in. And if the tracks are going, do you know what? It quite suits us for the furlough to keep our staff furloughed because we'll lose money. Uh, but the board simply don't have that level of clout. They don't have the level of clout to dictate prize money levels or various other factors. And I think we need to kind of keep that clear, the difference between the two, and the fact that, as I said, you clearly highlighted where it can be exploited if it is allowed to be exploited. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, if you actually read through it, all I'm doing is asking questions, and everything stated in there is facts. Maybe some people didn't know the structure of the board, the structure of the committees, but everything stated in there was facts, and it was just simply a case of asking questions and really to try and say where our positions are as owners and trainers, as the minority stakeholders. What kind of say have we got in the future of the sport? Have we any say? Where is the sport heading? Uh, and as you've already touched on, where it could potentially end, or how the committees and whatnot are put together. But yeah, as I say, I think it was generally well received from people that read through it. I think it educated some people that already were educated on the subject. It's maybe opened their eyes a little bit and maybe let them think about the future or where we're currently at and where we could be.
Yeah, I'm going to ask this because I'm an editor. I take it you got most of the things through that you looked to have in there, did you?
Yeah. I got everything in there, and I could probably have written two or three, but no, I think it kind of touched all the bases, covered quite a lot, and as I say, it seems to have resonated with quite a few people in the sport.
Going on exactly one of the topics that you did cover, we've got Peter on this Zoom call. One of the subjects that you did cover is that there's this area of people ready to or potentially ready to jump on him for having a discussion for us trying to talk about the industry without somebody trying to say you're not entitled to do that. So I'm quite conscious of not giving them any bullets to fire in Peter's direction on this. Um, so before we bring him in, I mean, what's your thoughts on the sort of the structure of the board? Would there be anything that would you make any changes to it, or how would you do things differently?
I think in terms of the way the board's structured, it's totally weighted in, it's totally weighted in the hands of the promoters. The owners and trainers have a small minority say, in my opinion, on the board. And I mean, I haven't spoken to Peter since the article. As I say, I think the owners and trainers and other shareholders within the sport who provide the product that ultimately billionaire businessmen and billionaire businesses are making a profit on the back of that. And I think that owners and trainers should have a larger say in the direction that the sport is going in.
Yeah, which I guess leads to a question. I don't know. You have a view on the board, Peter. Try not to shoot yourself in the foot or get you dragged in front of the chairman. In an ideal world, do you think that the board? How would you design the board in an ideal world if you went back from scratch? You had Donahue sitting in front of you and he said to you, Peter, design the Greyhound board for me. What would it look like?
I thought long and hard of this, and I've always got to be very careful. And people will actually probably realise from David's piece, our hands are tied to quite a degree that we can't actually sort of talk to our members because it's such a wide following of members that we've got. So you've got to really do it in public to actually have the discussion. Whereas where the RCPA is behind closed doors. So I have no doubt they have discussed, because there's lots of things what come back which are suggested by the RCPA, I have no doubt. So it's obviously been discussed, whereas we can't do that. Now, if I went away from the GBGB and went to any sort of board which was in charge of a sport, if I take it like that, so, I can't be held accountable saying things or I shouldn't be or anything like that. If I was taken away and I was looking at another sport and saying, how would I produce a board? I looked and I think to myself, well, you'd want the sports ground people involved, the people who are managing the sport, like the football stadiums, you'd want them involved. You'd want the players involved, to put their input in it. You'd want the owners of the clubs involved, or you'd want, the owners of the players, may that be as in the dogs. And then I'd say you want business people to be involved, to be able to say, look, this is the way you take things forward. This is how you promote things and bring people in. You might call it commercial, but I'd say somebody with a business mind on who's been there, done it, and as a track record of running a business. People always talk about Barry Hearns. You want somebody with a business mind in our sort of subject or in the sports club sort of business. And then I'd say to myself, well, you need somebody who understands regulation, the rules, etc. So you make sure some of the things what you think about doing or the path what you think about going, you can actually do that. There's no point having a great plan and actually you can't do it. So you've come up with this wonderful sort of plan, but somebody turns around and says, hang on a minute, in the rules or in the regulation, you can't do things. So I think you need one of those people involved. Then you need the legal side of things, people involved, to turn around and go, in law, you can't do that, or in commercial side of things. So and then you need your welfare people, to turn around and say, well, why don't you do this because of this on their side of the fence? And then for me, I'd stick 2 wild cards in there. So that would be 10 people. And your 2 wild cards would be the real people that come with mega ideas. Now, you don't want too many of them because mega ideas cost or can't be implemented, and they might sound good on paper, but in truth, it doesn't work. So with all these different people working together, you come to middle ground. You haven't got one side all getting their way, and their vision comes all the time, and it's the other people on the way are forgotten about, and they're not cared about. all of you together, when it's done in that sort of scenario, you all work together. Nobody gets exactly what they want, but there's a compromise along the way. There's always a compromise. And if I had my own dream sort of board in any sport, that would be what it is. And, you know, if you have somebody who's got too much, like Dave said, he thinks the promoters have too much power or got too much leeway, it's always going to be weighted towards that way. And you're never going to get a middle ground, or, you know, a ground what you think works for somebody else, because it's weighted too far that way. And so in any board, I think you've got to have compromise in there, and you've got to have it weighted correctly for any sort of sport.
I would suggest that it's a difficult decision, isn't it? Because if I'm a promoter and I'm saying, you know, I'm representing 6 tracks, 8 tracks, whatever, 4 tracks. We've got a considerable investment in there. I don't want my business dictated by these people, including some of the maybe even be amateurs. They may have no, you know, absolute expertise. Do we pay them all? And ultimately, to go back to something I said sort of 10 minutes ago, I've thought this through a lot as well, just from a different angle. And we still end up looking for a Mark Bird. You still end up with someone that everybody can go, do you know what? We need someone who can keep this lot in check. Because the moment you have someone who's too weak, you will naturally, in those circumstances, get people try and dominate. I mean, we've seen BGRB boards in the past where there have been absolute dictators running the industry from a promoter's chair. And the board jumped as high as they were told, which is why, you know, going back to what we talked about before, why you need that kind of that solid chairman who would be prepared, or chairman and MD who would be prepared to walk if they felt that the wheels were coming off and their integrity was being damaged. David, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
I fully understand where both of you are coming from. It gets to the point, I think, where we really decide whether we're a sport or we're a business. If we're a business and the current structure, which, as I covered in the column, is heavily weighted, where a few individuals that represent billion-pound industries will make the decisions. Now, if we're that and we're only a business, then we're a business. But if we're a sport and we're wanting to grow, you need to take the input from every stakeholder within the sport. It can't just run to benefit the few, because that isn't a sport. That at that point is a business ran by the few. It isn't ran by trainers, owners, breeders, kennel hands. You know, the list goes on and on and on, how many people earn a living out of this sport and rely on this sport. That would be my opinion on that.
Yeah, well, I think you make a point, though. You know, we're not an industry. Sorry, Peter, you were going to say.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in there, because that is really where Dave's brought in about the European Super League. That is really such a good one to bring in and use in an example, because as a business, European Super League wanted to solely run it as a business and make all the money for themselves. And, you know, they turn and go, well, maybe their supporters can still watch great football, like if we went into a Super League for tracks. So if we come back to that, so if we went to suddenly these super tracks, well, people who's attached to those super tracks might be all wonderful for a while, but it'd be like the football. You need the grassroots, you need the lower leagues to bring these players through to then go into the Super League. But the Super League weren't interested in all these lower leagues. They weren't interested. They just wanted all the money, because it was businessmen which were running the Super League, and they were thinking for themselves billions of pounds what they were going to produce. But you need that backup. And so where I was saying with Dave bring that in, it was good, because you need the breeders, you need the trainers, you need the youngsters starting off at the smaller tracks, etc., to come forward and flourish somewhere. And you can't suddenly just have a super league run by itself, because it doesn't work.
No, very, very much so. I mean, we'll go on to something a little later, or a separate discussion, where the direction I think the industry is going to go, because of various other things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. But we'll come to that.